At my startup presentation, my former business partner laughed at my prototype. "It matches your potential," he said, "unfinished and full of flaws." My mentor nodded. I only came as a professional courtesy. I stayed quiet. Then my chief engineer tapped the screen, and the room fell completely silent. I never expected my final investor pitch to end with the overhead lights dimming automatically as 20 pairs of eyes stared at me with newfound intensity. The polished conference room of Meridian Ventures, once buzzing with skeptical murmurs, now held its breath. I stood there, 34 years old, beside the device that had consumed 5 years of my life, my hand steady as I placed it in the center of the mahogany table. The room, once filled with a subtle symphony of typing, paper shuffling, and occasional sighs of boredom, now fell into a reverent hush. Richard stood across from me, his smirk fading, his Italian suit suddenly looking less impressive as the holographic display from my prototype bathed the room in a soft blue glow. "It's just another VR gimmick," he had said with that practiced condescension, moments before the demonstration began. "Outdated before it even launches." For a second, I didn't process his words. I blinked, maintaining professional composure, hoping desperately that the investors would see beyond his dismissal. But then I heard my former mentor, Dr. Harrison, add his own cutting remark. "I only came as a professional courtesy." He didn't say it like friendly advice. No trace of mentorship, no constructive criticism. Just cold distance, a confirmation that he too had written me off. I felt my breath catch, my heart raced, but years of pitching had taught me to keep my expression neutral. I could feel the weight of the investors' attention shifting, their interest waning with each dismissive comment. I didn't look at Richard directly, I couldn't, but I saw him from the corner of my eye, leaning back in his chair with that familiar look of smug satisfaction he always wore when he thought he won. Mira, my chief engineer, stood quietly beside me. She didn't rush, didn't panic, but I felt her hand briefly touch my arm. A silent message, trust the work. I wanted to defend myself, to remind Richard that he was the one who'd abandoned the project when funding got tight, to ask Dr. Harrison why he couldn't see that we'd solved the very problems he claimed were insurmountable. But my throat felt tight. The words wouldn't come. Why did their opinions still affect me after everything I'd accomplished? Why did I still seek approval from people who had systematically underestimated me? Was I still the same uncertain founder I'd been 5 years ago? Unseasoned, overeager, too idealistic? The atmosphere in the boardroom grew heavier. Someone coughed awkwardly near the refreshment table. An investor checked her watch. No one made eye contact anymore, not even the friendly face from Accurate Investments who had seemed so engaged during my introduction. I looked at our device, the Neuralink, sitting on the table. Its sleek, minimalist design gave no hint of the revolutionary technology inside. From the outside, it could have been mistaken for an elegant paperweight or an abstract sculpture. It looked simple, unassuming, nothing like the bulky headsets that dominated the market. I tried to speak, to begin our demonstration, but hesitation crept in. I only nodded, as if this moment of doubt was all perfectly normal, as if being publicly undermined before your life's work was even shown was just another Tuesday. Mira finally moved, calm and methodical, the way she always approached problems, whether in code or in life. She walked to the device, her movements deliberate, and placed her hand on its smooth surface. Dr. Harrison sighed audibly. "The market is saturated with half-baked VR solutions," he said, as if Richard's dismissal hadn't already poisoned the well. Mira didn't respond. She just looked at me, her eyes steady. There was something in her gaze, certainty, faith, and then she whispered, words meant only for me. "Let it speak for itself." I didn't know exactly what would happen next, but her quiet confidence steadied me. Because this wasn't just another pitch. This wasn't just another rejection waiting to happen. If you had asked me a year ago what this final investor meeting would be like, I'd have described enthusiastic questions, immediate term sheets, and people who recognized the paradigm shift we were offering. Instead, I got Richard's smirk and dismissal before we even begun. But before all that, before the insult and the palpable loss of interest, I had actually been hopeful. Nervous, of course, but hopeful. The morning of the presentation, I remember standing in our small lab, watching Mira run the final calibration tests. The space hummed with the faint electronic pulse of our servers. The air smelled of coffee and the lingering scent of the takeout we'd eaten at 2 a.m. The morning light filtered through blinds we rarely adjusted, creating patterns across our whiteboards filled with equations and user interface sketches. Mira looked up from her tablet, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and said, "It's ready, Alex. It's really ready." I smiled, but there was that familiar flutter in my stomach. Not excitement, but apprehension, the kind that had become my constant companion. I'd invited everyone who mattered to this demonstration, even those I wasn't sure I should. Richard had been my co-founder before leaving for a sure thing at Immersion Tech. Dr. Harrison, whose neuroscience lab had incubated our earliest prototypes before declaring our approach fundamentally limited. I invited them all because I thought, maybe this would be the moment things changed. Maybe they'd see me differently now, not as the idealistic grad student with more enthusiasm than business sense, not as the stubborn founder who refused to pivot to something more commercially viable, but as an innovator, someone who'd been right all along, someone worth believing in. I had sacrificed everything for the Neuralink, my savings, a relationship, countless nights of sleep, and when our initial funding dried up, when Richard took his connections and left, when even our original engineers started updating their resumes, Mira stayed. We rebuilt. We refined. We solved problems everyone said were unsolvable. When the prototype finally worked, truly worked, the first person I called was Dr. Harrison. I thought maybe, just maybe, the breakthrough would spark something in him. But his response was measured, skeptical. The human brain doesn't yield its secrets that easily, Alex. Still, I sent the invitations. I scheduled the meeting with the top-tier VCs. I prepared for weeks. Mira handled the technical demonstration while I refined the market analysis, the scaling strategy, the revenue projections. And honestly, the pitch began well. For the first 15 minutes or so, I had their attention. The younger investors asked engaged questions. The market size impressed them. My passion came through. It was going exactly according to plan. Until they arrived. Richard walked in 10 minutes late, bringing with him that distinctive air of someone who believes their time is inherently more valuable than yours. His custom suit, his subtle designer watch, his perfectly calculated stubble, all of it designed to convey success, authority, importance. Dr. Harrison arrived punctually, but with an expression that suggested he was already thinking about his next appointment. He nodded hello, took a seat near the back, and immediately began reviewing some papers unrelated to my presentation. I kept going, pushing through my slides with professional determination. But when I reached the demonstration portion and brought out the Neuralink, everything shifted. Even before I could explain how it worked, Richard leaned forward with that look I knew too well. "It matches your potential," he said with practiced casualness. "Unfinished and full of flaws." The words landed like a physical blow. A few investors glanced between us, sensing the history. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others seemed to mentally check out, as if Richard's assessment carried definitive weight. Dr. Harrison's follow-up. "I only came as a professional courtesy," just confirmed what the room was already thinking. This wasn't worth their time. That's the thing about the startup world. It's built on relationships, on social proof, on the subtle language of who endorses whom. One dismissive comment from the right person can sink you faster than any flaw in your business model. And yet I still tried. I still wanted this pitch to succeed. I had no idea how drastically everything was about to change. I watched Mira approach the Neuralink, her movements precise and confident despite the heavy atmosphere in the room. Unlike me, she seemed entirely unmoved by Richard's presence or Dr. Harrison's skepticism. Her focus remained solely on the device, our device. Richard checked his phone, barely bothering to look up as Mira began the demonstration. Dr. Harrison maintained a polite but distant expression, the kind reserved for former students whose work you've already mentally dismissed. The tension made the air feel thick, each breath requiring more effort than it should. But I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to defend our work with words. I just watched Mira, trying to draw from her steady composure. She placed her hand on the smooth surface of the Neuralink, her fingers finding the nearly invisible sensor panel. With her other hand, she tapped a sequence on her tablet. "Neuralink isn't just another VR headset," she began, her voice clear and measured. "It doesn't create artificial realities. It reveals the one we already share." Richard scoffed quietly, but Mira continued as if she hadn't heard. The human mind processes vast amounts of information every second, but our conscious awareness captures only a fraction. Neuralink accesses those deeper layers of perception and cognition without invasive procedures. She pressed her palm more firmly against the device. It's calibrated to my neural patterns now. When I activate it. Her finger hovered over the tablet screen. She looked at me one last time, and I saw not a question but a promise in her eyes. Then she tapped the screen. The lights dimmed as the Neuralink device softly hummed. A hologram appeared in the center of the boardroom. Not just a regular projection, but a detailed display showing the room itself with real-time data. Everyone's facial expressions, body language, and even emotions were being analyzed and visualized. Thermal patterns revealed hidden reactions, and soft waves tracked the sound in the room. Around each person's head, faint colored glows represented brain activity. Mira explained calmly, "This isn't a virtual world, it shows the hidden layers of the real one." The room was silent in awe. Even the skeptics were stunned. Dr. Harrison took off his glasses, whispering, "This is impossible," with wonder in his voice. An investor leaned forward, asking about clinical testing. I replied confidently, "We had early approvals and strong research lined up." As investors whispered and excitement grew, I noticed Richard and Dr. Harrison. Richard looked shaken, like he regretted walking away. Dr. Harrison was scribbling notes, deeply engaged now. Mira continued showing how the tech worked. No wires, no implants, just thought into action. For 20 minutes, no one looked away. When the lights came back on, the room was still. Then Barbara Chen stood up and invited us to dinner, a clear signal she was ready to invest. Others followed quickly. I kept calm on the outside, but inside, I felt something powerful break free. All the doubt and rejection I faced was falling away. As the room cleared, Richard approached me. "That was unexpected," he said, offering his hand. I didn't take it. "We don't have anything to discuss." He left in silence. Dr. Harrison stayed behind. He looked at the device, then at me. "I was wrong," he said. I nodded. "We're publishing the paper soon. I'll send you an early copy." He paused at the door. "I'm proud of you, Alex." And then he left too. 5 years too late, but still something loosened in my chest. After everyone left, after the room cleared of business cards and empty water bottles and the electric buzz of potential millions, Mira and I sat alone at the massive table. "We did it," she said quietly. I looked at her, my chief engineer, my co-founder after Richard left, the only person who had seen the vision clearly enough to stay when everyone else fled. "No, you did it. That demonstration." She smiled. "I just showed them what was already there, what you always knew was possible." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the seismic shift that had just occurred in our professional lives. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and term sheets and valuation negotiations. Tonight would probably involve expensive champagne and disbelieving laughter. But right now, in this moment of perfect stillness after years of struggle, I made myself a promise. I would never again doubt the power of persistence. I would never again seek validation from those who couldn't see what I could see. Because sometimes the most satisfying success isn't just proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right. So to anyone out there fighting for an idea everyone else dismisses, to anyone whose potential is underestimated, to anyone who's been told impossible so many times they've started to believe it, don't. Keep building, keep refining, keep believing. Because sometimes all it takes is one perfect demonstration to change everything. And to Richard, wherever he is tonight, drowning his regrets in single malt scotch, I hope he learns something valuable. Never underestimate the power of the people you underestimate. That day changed everything for us. 3 months later, we closed our Series A at a valuation that made financial headlines. 6 months after that, our first medical application received expedited FDA review. By the end of the year, we had partnership inquiries from research institutions on 4 continents. But more importantly, I changed. I stopped looking for approval from people who had already decided not to give it. I stopped measuring my worth by the opinions of those who had refused to see possibility. I started trusting myself and the select few, like Mira, who truly shared the vision. So yes, that was my final investor pitch. Not the failure everyone expected, but the breakthrough no one saw coming. If this story speaks to you, if you've ever had your potential dismissed by the very people who should have nurtured it, know that you're not alone. Your moment of vindication may not come in a dramatic boardroom scene. It might be quieter, more personal, but it will come if you persist. Because the most powerful force in innovation isn't genius or luck or connections. It's the stubborn refusal to give up on what you know is possible, even when everyone else already has.